Here's the situation. I have an assignment. I need to write an essay using at least one source, an article about some aspect of the internet. I'm thinking of writing something about cats and memes. I do a quick internet search and find an interesting looking article that I'm going to use. How Cats Evolved to Win the Internet by Abigail Tucker. The first step in using a source is to get familiar with it. In this case, I need to read the article. After taking a look, I found a passage that I want to use for my essay. Now that I've picked a passage that I want to use, how can I include it in the essay that I'm writing? First, I want to take a look at the passage and get familiar with it so that I understand what is being conveyed by the author. Their virtual success is rooted in their real biology. Cats are solitary, asocial hypercarnivores built to do one thing: get meat. The famous cat meme, "I can has cheeseburger," in which a gaping gray cat demands a quarter pounder, had the right idea. Every fiber of the feline being is evolved to hunt, and cats employ a distinctive stalk and ambush approach in which they sit very still and watch for prey to innocently wander by, then explode from the underbrush to slaughter it. This stalking and pouncing is perfect for a 6-second vine or a pithy tweet. Think of your favorite YouTube cat videos. A cat springs into a box or bops a baby on the head without warning, or rockets out from beneath the bed. What you're watching is an ambush. Next, I will try to link it to the topic of my essay. Here's a rough draft of what I might write. The reason cats have become so popular on the internet is rooted in their biology. For example, the famous cat meme, "I can has cheeseburger," in which a gaping gray cat demands a quarter pounder, had the right idea. Every fiber of the feline being is evolved to hunt, and cats employ a distinctive stalk and ambush approach, in which they sit very still and watch for prey to innocently wander by, then explode from the underbrush to slaughter it. But is this a good way to use the original source? Am I quoting it properly? Does this look good to you? Well, no. This is not an effective way to use this source. There are really two main issues to highlight. There is no citation, no indication that this idea came from someone else, and it is a verbatim, word-for-word copy and paste of the original source. Because of these issues, this is a very clear example of plagiarism. There is no citation and there are no quotation marks. Someone reading my essay would not know that this idea comes from someone else, or that the text itself was written by someone else. They might think that I'm trying to pass this off as my own idea and my own writing, even if that's not my intention. To be very clear, this would be a violation of HSU's academic integrity and honesty policy, and not only would I get a very poor grade on the assignment, I might end up facing large consequences such as being put on academic probation or even suspension. However, I'm on the right track, and with a couple of tweaks, I can turn this debacle into a very effective use of the source. It's important to remember that although it takes some more work, with a little practice, it becomes fairly easy to properly and effectively use sources. So, how can we improve this? The first thing is to add a citation so that it's clear to my readers that I'm using someone else's idea, and how they can learn more about that idea by finding the original source on their own. Here is an example of an in-text citation that follows the APA, American Psychological Association, style manual. I can simply add the last name of the author and the year the article was published in parentheses at the end of the passage. But am I good to go, or do I still need to do some more work? Well, it's still a word-for-word copy of the original article, so while my reader will know that I'm using someone else's idea, it's not clear that I'm also using their writing. Again, my reader may think that I'm trying to pass this off as my own writing. So, while I've added the citation and I've made it clear that I'm referencing another author's work, it's still not clear that I'm using their writing. To indicate that I'm quoting them, I will need to add quotation marks. Without those quotation marks, I'm still in violation of the HSU academic integrity and honesty policy because I'm not indicating that I'm using someone else's writing. However, I'm still very much on the right track and can do a very simple thing to avoid getting in trouble here: adding quotation marks. This really is as simple as it sounds. Enclose the entire passage that I'm quoting in quotation marks. This makes it very clear that I'm using Tucker's own wording and I'm not trying to pass it off as my own. And now I'm no longer in violation of the HSU academic integrity and honesty policy. But there is more to effective quoting than just avoiding getting in trouble. The passage that I have now is still not very great. I'm taking a huge amount of Tucker's work and not really integrating it into my own. Most instructors won't be impressed with this effort, and I'll likely get a poor grade. However, yet again, there are some small tweaks that I can do to make this much more effective and get myself a better grade. Before we get into the mechanics of effective quoting, let's look at some guidelines to follow when trying to determine when it is appropriate to quote. The first consideration is that some assignments will specifically require that you not quote. Instead, you'll be expected to paraphrase the sources that you use. This means that you will put the author's idea in your own words. Another useful consideration is to only quote when it is especially important to use the exact wording of the original source. This is fairly subjective and may not be very obvious until you've practiced it a bit. If you ever have questions about whether or not to quote, you can make an appointment with a writing studio consultant. In this example, I'm going to quote a shorter passage that conveys the exact idea that is relevant to my topic and would be very difficult for me to put in my own words in a way that isn't just a word-for-word find and replace. For now, let's look at one strategy for effective quoting: quote sandwiches. This is when you wrap a quote within your own writing and ideas. First, I'll add the top bun, which is the introduction to the quote. I want to use a signal phrase and reporting verb like Abigail Tucker, 2016, explains that. And then next, I'll insert the quote using quotation marks. Also note that I've included the citation using the author's name, the year of publication, and the paragraph in which the quote appears. This is all following APA style and will vary if you're following another style, but will include similar information. Lastly, I will explain why the quote is important and how it connects to my topic. So let's go back to my paper. How does this look to you now? I've got the citation that indicates that I'm using someone else's idea. I've also used quotation marks to show that I'm also using the author's exact words. Lastly, I've integrated the quote into my own ideas by using the quote sandwich method. Now I have a passage that not only isn't in violation of the HSU academic integrity and honesty policy, it is also written in a way that is effective for my essay. The next question you may have is how and when to paraphrase instead of quote. Most often you will want to paraphrase big ideas in order to summarize a large concept or to accentuate one part of a larger concept that is relevant to your topic. You can learn more about paraphrasing from our video about effective paraphrasing.